What do you do when your own wife stands in front of friends, lifts a drink, and jokes she would sleep with other men because fidelity means nothing to her, while everyone laughs and looks at you to see if you will explode? How long can a quiet husband stay calm while she turns his pain into a running joke and tells her family he is controlling for wanting basic respect? Why did I choose to answer her jokes not with shouting or revenge, but with a silent file tree, a hidden USB, and a set of papers waiting in an office tower lobby? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Corin Vale, and for most of my life I thought loyalty was simple. You made a promise, you kept it, and if something hurt the person you loved, you did not turn it into a joke. I work in IT support for a regional healthcare company, which means my days are filled with broken passwords, frozen screens, and quiet thank yous when something starts working again. People only really notice my job when something goes wrong, and in a strange way, that is how my marriage began to feel too. As long as nothing obvious was broken, Maya said everything was fine, even when her words started to slice into me in small, sharp ways that she pretended were harmless. When Maya became the social media and event coordinator for a bar chain, she said it was her dream job. She loved lights, music, and people, and she told me that this role finally made her feel seen. I said I was happy for her, and I meant it, but I also noticed how quickly our evenings changed. She started coming home later because there was always one more influencer to talk to, one more after party to attend, one more brainstorm session with the DJ, a man named Brent, who she said understood her vibe better than anyone. At first, I accepted all of it as part of a new schedule, the way you accept emergency calls at work during a system failure. The first time she joked about sleeping with other men, we were standing in the kitchen after one of her shifts. She leaned against the counter, still in her bar clothes, scrolling through her phone while I loaded the dishwasher. She said, in a light tone, that fidelity was an old rule for boring people who needed control, and that if I ever bored her too much, she would just sleep with someone else to balance things out. Then she laughed, as if that line should land like a punchline, not a punch. I froze for a second, a plate still in my hand, and told her quietly that hearing my wife say she might sleep with other men did not feel like a joke to me. She rolled her eyes and replied that I took everything too seriously and that she was obviously kidding. But the joke returned again and again. She told me that the girls at the bar thought monogamy was socially dead and that I needed to catch up with the times. She said that if I trusted her, I would not flinch when she joked about doing whatever she wanted with whoever she wanted. I said that trust did not mean pretending hurtful ideas were funny. It meant knowing your partner would protect your heart in public and private. She shook her head and laughed, telling me that if a few words could shake me, maybe I was not as solid as she thought. Our daughter, Lena, sat in the living room with her headphones on, watching a show, and I wondered how much of our tone she could hear beneath the standard volume of cartoon voices. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat at the small desk in the corner of our bedroom, the only place in the apartment that felt like mine. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, something I usually did for tracking hardware orders or ticket numbers. This time, the columns were simple: date, shift time, new joke, other details. I started with the past few weeks, filling in when she had begun working at the rooftop bar, when she had come home late, when the first comment about sleeping with someone else had been made. I did not add any emotional labels, just facts. The numbers and words lined up quietly, forming a pattern I could not completely see yet, but felt in my chest. A few days later, I went to my mother's apartment for coffee while Lena was at a friend's house. My mother, Iris, used to be a nurse, and she notices small signs the way I notice error messages on a screen. I told her, in careful words, that Maya had started making jokes about how fidelity meant nothing and that she might sleep with other men if I bored her. I said that when I expressed hurt, Maya called me old-fashioned and controlling. Iris's face tightened in a way she could not hide. She said she had seen people in the hospital who joked about drinking or cheating or gambling, and that often the jokes were just rehearsals for their real choices. She told me that if someone kept wounding the same person with the same line, that was not humor, it was a message. She advised me to protect myself and Lena, not by screaming, but by paying attention and keeping a clear record of what was actually happening. Later that evening, Maya told her mother, Rita, a completely different version of our conversation. According to Maya, I had demanded that she stop being playful and stop talking to male co-workers altogether. Rita repeated back, through calls and comments, that I was trying to drag her daughter back into the dark ages and that modern women did not owe anyone blind fidelity. When Maya relayed this to me, she sounded pleased, like she had gathered witnesses for a trial that had not officially begun. I realized that a story about me was already moving through other people's homes and phones, and in that story, I was the rigid husband who wanted to own his wife. One night, I sat again at my desk nook, updating the spreadsheet with new dates and comments. As I typed, a small calendar reminder popped up in the corner of my screen. Riverside Hub, 11 a.m., meeting personal. I had created it one evening when I walked past a shared office space that offered confidential support sessions, wondering if I should talk to someone outside the family. Now the reminder blinked at me, asking for a decision. I stared at it for a few seconds, feeling the weight of every line I had already typed. I moved the cursor and clicked dismiss, not because I had decided never to go, but because I did not yet know what I wanted to say in that room. As the reminder vanished, I heard the building door below open and then the familiar sound of our apartment door latch clicking. Maya stepped into the bedroom a moment later, still in her work clothes, phone in her hand. For a second before the screen dimmed, I saw a preview of a message from Brent, some string of laughing words and small icons. She said that the night had been amazing, that everyone loved her new bits about not believing in fidelity, and that I needed to stop being so tense. I closed the spreadsheet, minimized everything, and turned toward her, my face calm. On the outside, nothing changed, but inside, I shifted from hoping the joke would die to wondering how far she planned to push it. Weeks passed, and the joke did not die. It grew legs and walked into rooms I had never entered. One evening, Maya told me that Kayla, one of her coworkers, had filmed a small relationship rant for the bar's social media page. She described it in an amused voice as a silly clip where she explained that fidelity was for cowards and that if her husband ever bored her, she would sleep around and call it equal. She said people loved it because it was real and that I should feel proud to be part of her brand. I asked if she had used my name, and she replied that she did not need to. Everyone who mattered already knew who she meant. I did not go looking for the clip right away. I saw enough of it in the way people at my workplace started to speak. In the open plan healthcare IT office, I began to catch fragments of conversation in corners near the coffee machine. Two colleagues watched something on a phone and laughed, repeating a line about fidelity meaning nothing and husbands not owning their wives. One of them glanced over at me and then quickly looked away, like a child caught staring at a wound. Later that day, another coworker made a playful comment about how he hoped his wife never heard that no fidelity speech, or he would be in trouble. He apologized when he saw my face tighten, even though I had not said a word. A few days later, my manager, Mr. Anders, sent me a short message asking if I could step into the small meeting room for a quick talk. I walked across the office, past rows of monitors and tangled headsets, feeling like I was heading toward a hallway where my personal life had already arrived before me. In the room, he sat with a neutral expression and an open tablet. He said, in careful language, that he did not want to intrude on my private life, but that a few staff members had mentioned a viral video connected to my wife, and that they were concerned I might be under stress. He added that the company cared about emotional stability, and that any serious problems at home could affect my work, especially if there were public scenes. I told him, still calm, that I had not shouted at Maya, had not threatened her, had not tried to stop her from working. I explained that I was dealing with a difficult situation where my wife liked to turn painful ideas into jokes, and that some of those jokes had traveled further than I expected. I said that my work remained steady, and that if I needed time, I would request it through the proper channels. He nodded, said he believed me, but reminded me that perception in a workplace could be as important as reality, and asked me to make sure there were no public arguments that could drift into the office gossip stream. When I left the meeting, my stomach felt heavy, but my hands stayed steady. At my desk, I opened the spreadsheet again and added a new tab labeled with the date. On it, I wrote the initials of people connected to the clip and the rumors. K.A. for Kayla, M.A. for Mr. Anders, and the first letters of the coworkers who had repeated parts of Maya's speech. I recorded the dates of the conversations and a few key phrases, nothing more. After I saved the file, a small Cloud Sync notification appeared in the corner of the screen, saying that my changes had been uploaded successfully. For the first time, I felt relief seeing that message, as if some part of the truth now lived somewhere outside my hard drive and my head. That evening, I stopped at the supermarket on the way home to pick up groceries. While I stood in the checkout line with milk, bread, and Lena's favorite cereal in my basket, two women behind me discussed a clip from a bar account. One said it was refreshing to see a woman say fidelity meant nothing and that she would sleep with whoever she wanted if her husband tried to limit her. The other said the husband sounded pathetic and that men who believed in loyalty were just scared of being replaced. They laughed, and one of them mentioned Maya's first name in passing, as if she were a character in a show they both followed. I paid for the groceries, stepped aside, and finally opened my phone. In a quiet group chat with some old friends, someone had dropped Kayla's video with a single line asking if this was my wife. I watched 10 seconds of it, just enough to hear Maya's voice say, with complete confidence, that fidelity meant nothing to her, and that if her husband bored her, she would sleep with other men and call it freedom. I paused the video, took a screenshot of the frame that showed her face, and saved it into a folder on my phone. Then I opened my wallet, took out a small sticky note, and wrote 2 words: "Bring forms." I folded the note and slipped it into the same pocket where I kept my ID, close enough that I would feel it every time I reached for my card. As I walked toward my car, the sky turning dull above the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. It was a new message from Mr. Anders, asking if I could schedule that quick follow-up meeting he had mentioned, just to make sure everything stayed stable. I stared at the screen for a moment, the words blurring slightly, and realized that the story Maya was telling had now reached every layer of my life. I put the phone away, feeling the folded note pressing against my fingers, and understood that the next version of this story would not be told on a stage or through a screen. It would be written somewhere she could not edit with a joke. Maya decided that the best way to prove I was overreacting was to invite me deeper into her world. She said that her bar was hosting a big themed night to celebrate their numbers, and that it would mean a lot if I came instead of sitting at home and sulking. She added that Brent would be DJing, that Kayla would be filming content, and that it would be good for me to see how harmless everything was. I told her calmly that I did not feel comfortable being the punchline in a room full of strangers, but she insisted that I was imagining things, and that if I saw her at work, I would understand she was only playing. In the end, I agreed to go, not because I believed her, but because sometimes you have to look directly at a wound to understand how deep it is. The club was already full when we arrived. Lights strobed over the dance floor, music hit in waves, and the rooftop area buzzed with people dressed like every night was a celebration. Maya greeted the staff like a host, greeting honored guests, hugging Kayla, touching Brent's arm when she passed him, moving from group to group with practiced ease. I stayed near the edge at first, close to the bar rail where I could see the dance floor and the smoking patio through glass doors. I noticed right away that people recognized her not just as an employee, but as a character from that clip, because someone called out a line about fidelity meaning nothing, and everyone around her laughed. She turned and pointed toward me, telling them that I was the serious husband who believed in old rules and that she loved me but refused to be owned. People laughed again, not cruelly at first, just in that easy way people laugh when they have a drink in their hand and a story to enjoy. Brent came over to me, smiling as if we were friends, and said that he admired my patience because most men would not let their wives be so free. I answered that I did not see my wife as something I let or did not let do anything, but that I believed fidelity mattered. He shrugged and said that in this crowd, freedom tested everything, and walked away, leaving the words hanging between us like smoke. After a while, music shifted, and Kayla grabbed a microphone to hype the room between sets. She called Maya onto the small platform, saying the bar's own relationship queen had something to share. People nearby cheered and raised their phones, already recording. Maya took the microphone, obviously tipsy, and began to talk about how people still expected old-fashioned loyalty from women, even when those same people cheated or lied. She said, in a loud voice, that fidelity meant nothing to her if it only flowed one way, and that she would sleep with whoever she wanted if she ever felt bored or controlled, because her body and her time belonged to her alone. The crowd reacted exactly the way she wanted. Some shouted that she should say it louder, some chanted that nobody owned anybody, and several phones stayed fixed on her face, capturing every line. I felt my chest tighten, not because I had never heard the words before, but because now they were being archived again in dozens of devices held by people who did not know anything about our life beyond this performance. I did not rush toward the platform or demand that she stop. Instead, I moved closer to the smoking patio doors and found a small table along the wall where the sound still carried clearly. I placed my phone on the table, opened the recorder app under my hand, and started recording. From that position, I heard her repeat the lines she had used in our kitchen, but here they were sharper and louder. She said she did not believe in belonging to one man, and that if I tried to make her, she would respond by sleeping with someone else and calling it balance. Kayla laughed and encouraged the crowd to cheer. Brent moved nearer to the stage and shook his head with a grin, as if pretending to be embarrassed, but he did not contradict anything she implied. Someone near me commented that her husband looked too calm and that maybe he liked being humiliated, and a few people snickered at that. When the moment ended, Maya hopped down, glowing from the attention, and Kayla rushed over to review the clip on her phone. I stopped the recording and slipped my phone back into my pocket, my face still composed. Maya came over later, sweat on her forehead, and said that I needed to relax because everyone understood she was just being dramatic. I told her, in a steady voice, that every time she turned the promise we made into a joke, she cut something inside me that did not grow back. She shook her head, said I was ruining her high, and walked away toward Brent, who welcomed her with open arms and a drink. At the end of the night, we headed down to the parking garage beneath the bar. The concrete walls reflected empty echoes of the music that still pulsed above us. I opened the car door for her and helped her in when she stumbled slightly in her heels. Once she was inside, busy with her phone, probably checking reactions to her performance, I walked around to the driver's side and sat for a moment without starting the engine. I took out my phone and replayed the first seconds of the recording, just enough to hear her voice saying that fidelity meant nothing and that she would sleep with other men if she felt controlled. Then I paused it and saved the file with the date and location in a neutral description. As I stared at the dark windshield, my phone screen lit up with an incoming call from a number I had labeled as private. I had spoken to that number only once before, a short conversation that had given me more questions than answers, and I had not yet decided whether I was ready for what those answers might mean. The phone vibrated against the console, the name private glowing softly, while a group of people came down the stairwell laughing. One of them repeated Maya's line about fidelity meaning nothing, and the echo bounced off the walls until it reached my car. I watched the call ring out without answering and realized that the world where she turned our marriage into a slogan was never going to shrink back to the size of our kitchen. The next family gathering did not take long to appear on the calendar. It was Rita's birthday, and she wanted everyone to meet at a family restaurant with a long table and bright lights that made every plate look clean and happy. Maya announced that this would be a good chance for us to reset and that she planned to tell the story of the club night in a way that would make everyone laugh. I understood that she was planning to strengthen her version of events, to lock in a narrative where she was the brave woman who resisted control and I was the rigid husband who could not keep up. I agreed to go because avoiding the room would only make it easier for her to remold me into whatever shape she needed. The restaurant buzzed with other families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. Our long table was near the center, with balloons tied to the chairs at either end. Rita sat near the head of the table, Maya beside her, Kayla a few seats away as an honored guest. My parents, Iris and Gareth, sat opposite them, quieter but present. Lena sat between me and Maya, coloring on a paper menu while listening to the adults with one ear. At first, the conversation stayed safe, focusing on school, work, and small jokes about aging. Then Rita asked with a practiced smile whether Maya had any fun work stories to share. Maya launched into her version of the club night. She told them that the bar had asked her to speak as part of a promo, that she had delivered a brilliant bit about not believing in old-fashioned fidelity, and that the crowd had loved it. She said that some men could not handle a woman who spoke her mind, and that I had been sulking at the edge of the room instead of cheering. Kayla chimed in, saying that it was one of the best speeches she had filmed and that the comments online were full of women thanking Maya for her honesty. Then Maya described her line about fidelity meaning nothing and sleeping with other men if necessary, framing it as a daring performance that my traditional heart could not take. I waited until the laughter died down and then spoke slowly. I said that at the club I had watched my wife stand on a platform, filmed by half the room, and announced that fidelity meant nothing to her and that she would sleep with other men if she felt bored or controlled. I explained that this was not just an offhand joke said in a private kitchen, but part of a public event designed to be shared and saved. I added that I had seen how Brent and others responded, and that no one there had treated it as harmless teasing. I kept my voice calm, my hands flat on the table, my eyes moving from face to face. Rita responded before Maya did. She said in a sharp tone that I was missing the point, and that modern women did not owe blind loyalty to anyone. She insisted that Maya was simply rejecting the idea of being owned and that I was twisting her words because I was uncomfortable with her freedom. She accused me of trying to shame her daughter in front of the family by dragging a playful speech into a serious discussion. Maya nodded, encouraged by the support, and added that I was turning into exactly the kind of insecure husband she joked about on stage. My mother, Iris, spoke quietly from her side of the table. She said that for her generation, fidelity was not about ownership, but about mutual safety and respect, and that if someone said fidelity meant nothing to them, they could not be surprised if their partner no longer felt secure. She did not raise her voice or attack Maya, but her words held a weight the room could not ignore. My father, Gareth, looked down at his plate, his jaw tight, then glanced at me with a kind of tired sympathy. Oscar, Maya's father, kept his eyes on his glass, letting Rita's words stand for both of them. The tension at the table became a separate presence, sitting between the plates and glasses. Maya tried to lighten it by saying everyone needed to stop being so serious and remember that she was just telling stories. Rita repeated that I had always been too stiff and that if I did not loosen up, I would lose Maya and have only myself to blame. I listened and realized that in their version of this story, my desire for basic fidelity counted as a flaw rather than a strength. I did not argue further. I knew that in this room, facts could be twisted, but somewhere else, they would stay straight. The next day, I took Lena to the park. The air was cool, and the playground was full of children running from slide to swings while parents watched from benches. We walked along the path until we found an empty bench with a clear view of everything. Lena climbed onto it beside me, letting her legs swing above the gravel. For a while, she talked about school projects and a game she wanted to play, but then she went quiet and looked down at her shoes. She asked if I was still mad at Mom. I told her, in gentle words, that I was not exactly mad, but I was hurt and confused because sometimes grown-ups forgot how important it was to protect each other's feelings. She frowned, thinking, and then said she had heard Mom talking to Aunt Kayla in the car. She said that Mom had told Kayla she belonged to nobody and that nobody got to claim her, and then Lena asked if that meant Mom did not belong to our family or to me. She reminded me, with the plain honesty children carry, that we always said family meant belonging together. The question slid into my chest like a small blade, not fast but deep. I told her that belonging in a family was supposed to mean choosing each other every day, not owning each other, and that sometimes adults got confused and tried to sound strong by acting like they did not need anyone. I promised her that whatever happened between Mom and me, we both loved her, and that would not change. She listened, nodded slowly, and seemed to accept that answer for the moment. Then she jumped off the bench, ran toward the swings, and called for me to watch how high she could go. I stayed seated for a few seconds, looking at her small figure against the sky, and then felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. When I took it out, a reminder filled the screen. A calendar entry labeled with a new place and time, Northside office 9:20 a.m., meeting personal. This time I did not hesitate over it in confusion. I knew exactly why it was there and what I intended to say when I sat in that room. I pressed dismiss, not to ignore it, but because I was already moving toward it in my mind, step by quiet step. The morning of the Northside office meeting, I woke up feeling strangely steady. The air in the apartment was the same. The sounds outside were the same. Maya's voice in the kitchen, talking into her phone, was the same cheerful tone she used when she wanted to sound like nothing was wrong. Only my direction had changed. I took Lena to school as usual, listening to her talk about a class project, then drove across town to the glass-fronted building where the office was located. Inside, the lobby smelled like coffee and printer paper. I checked in at a small desk, then sat in a chair that felt too soft for the thoughts in my head. When I was called in, I sat across from a person who did not know me, my family, or the version of my life that had been turned into content. I spoke in slow, careful sentences, describing what had been happening at home and in public. I said that my wife had built a persona around saying fidelity meant nothing, that she had joked about sleeping with other men if she felt bored, and that these lines were now part of videos and posts that strangers watched. I added that I had recordings, screenshots, dates, and witnesses, and that I did not want to use them to destroy her, only to protect myself and Lena. The person listened, asked about practical matters like living arrangements, finances, and our daughter, and finally explained, in neutral terms, which formal steps existed if I wanted to leave the marriage without shouting. I left the office with no thick stack of papers in my hand, only with a list in my mind and a decision that had moved from feeling to fact. The person had not told me what to feel. They had simply outlined the route for someone who did not want to fight in bars or comment sections, but in places where dates and actions mattered more than opinions. On the drive home, I pictured my spreadsheet, my folders, my screenshots, and I realized that for months I had been building the groundwork for a choice I had pretended I did not want to make. That evening, after Lena had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, I pulled my chair up to the small desk in the bedroom nook. I opened my laptop and looked at the file tree I had already begun. Home, auto, bank, archive A, archive B. It was clean and simple, the way I liked my work. I created a new subfolder under archive A for social media evidence, another for recordings, and a third for messages. I moved each piece into its proper place, made sure file names had dates, and checked that everything matched the reality I remembered. No extra lines, no dramatizations, only the truth in digital form. A small notification appeared, saying that the updated folders had been uploaded to the cloud. For once, that tiny line of text felt like a safety net. Next, I moved to the physical side. I switched on the old printer in the hallway, and it groaned awake before the first page slid out. I printed selected screenshots, Kayla's clip description, comments calling me controlling, stills from the club where Maya stood with a microphone and a drink in her hand. I printed transcripts I had made from the recordings, simple pages where her public lines were typed beneath dates and locations. The smell of toner thickened the narrow space as the printer hummed steadily. I stacked the pages on the small table and let them cool. From a drawer, I took a thin binder we had once used for meal plans and school schedules. I emptied out the old papers and began slipping the new printed pages into clear sleeves, one by one. When I finished, the binder was thicker than it had ever been. On the spine, I wrote a single word on a label: household. It was accurate. Everything inside was about how our household had been treated like a stage. I placed the binder on the shelf above the desk, beside the real utilities binder and the bank folder. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Inside, it was the cleanest version of what I had lived. On the laptop again, I inserted a small USB stick. I copied the most important folders over: the spreadsheet, the audio files, the key screenshots. A small bar moved across the screen as the files transferred. When it finished, I ejected the drive, wrote today's date on a tiny label, and held it between my fingers for a moment. Then I walked to the hallway cabinet, opened the door, and pulled out the thick taxes binder. Lifting the back cover, I taped the USB stick underneath, pressed the tape flat, and closed the binder. When I slid it back into place, it looked no different from the outside. I closed the cabinet and turned the small key in the lock. The click was soft but clear, like a period at the end of a sentence. As I stepped back, I heard the building door downstairs open, then the echo of steps on the stairwell. A moment later, our apartment door opened and Maya came in, talking loudly into her phone about a new theme night at the bar. She walked past the hallway cabinet without even glancing at it, dropped her bag on the floor, and moved into the kitchen. I listened from the doorway as she told someone that her no-fidelity rant had done great numbers and that she was thinking of turning it into a weekly series. I did not interrupt. I simply felt the locked cabinet behind my shoulder and knew that for the first time, I was ahead of her story instead of chasing it. The next small test came at a school fundraiser night in the community center hall. Maya had volunteered to help organize it and was determined to show the other parents how fun and modern she was. She told me that she expected me to be there too, so people could see that we were not the boring married couple some assumed we were. She dressed in a way that made her look like the center of a show, not a support act, and spent the first hour walking around with a clipboard, greeting families, and supervising games. Kayla showed up as well, camera in hand, claiming she was there to capture community spirit, but her lens always seemed to find Maya's face. I stood near the back of the hall, close enough to see and hear, far enough not to be in every shot. Children ran from table to table, parents balanced plates and raffle tickets. When a group of adults gathered near the drinks table, Maya drifted toward them, followed by Kayla. I listened as she introduced herself as the person in that clip and explained with a laugh that she did not believe in old rules like fidelity and that she was proud to say she belonged to nobody. Some parents laughed along, others looked away, uncomfortable. She mentioned lightly that she was still married because it was useful on paper, but that her freedom came first. Someone asked, half joking, how her husband felt about all that. She turned, pointed toward where I stood, and said that I was still catching up, that I was an old soul trying to live in a new age. The small circle looked at me, some curious, some amused, waiting to see if I would joke back or walk away. I walked over, not quickly, but with the same steady pace I used at work when a ticket needed attention. When I reached the group, I did not raise my voice or try to match hers. I said, in a calm tone, that I had heard her speech many times now, and that I understood exactly what she wanted people to think. I added that I was done arguing about what she called jokes and what I knew as a clear position. I told the group that I believed fidelity still mattered, that I believed promises still meant something, and that if someone stood in public again and again saying fidelity meant nothing, they should not be surprised when their partner chose to take those words seriously. I finished by saying that from this point on, I would not fight over this in bars or community halls. I said I would handle everything properly, in places where words were written down and checked. My tone was quiet enough that people had to lean in a little, but no one mistook the meaning. Maya stared at me, caught between anger and confusion, and Kayla lowered her camera slightly. Right then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I reached for it and saw the alarm I had set blink on the screen. Paper drop, 2:40 p.m. I silenced it with one touch, slipped the phone away again, and met Maya's eyes. She opened her mouth as if to say something sharp, then seemed to think better of it. The circle slowly broke apart, some people going back to their children, others moving toward the raffle table. From across the room, I saw Iris watching me, her expression unreadable but focused. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had said enough and exactly what I needed to say, no more and no less. The day of the actual paper drop arrived with clear skies and ordinary traffic, the kind of day that hides its weight on purpose. Maya had a brand strategy meeting scheduled in an office tower downtown, a place with glass walls and an echoing lobby that she liked to post from. She bragged that she was becoming the face of the bar chain and that soon she would be meeting with bigger partners. She left the apartment dressed in a sharp blazer, phone in hand, talking to Kayla about what angles would look best if they filmed anything. I arrived at the tower earlier than she did and took up a quiet position near one of the large stone pillars in the lobby. Office workers moved in and out through the revolving doors. A security guard watched a bank of monitors behind a sleek desk. The floor was polished enough to reflect shoes and coffee cups. My phone showed a short message from the contact I still labeled as private, sent earlier that morning, confirming that arrangements had been made as discussed. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and focused on the entrance. When Maya walked in, she looked exactly like the version of herself she showed online. Confident, smiling, one hand on her bag, the other on her phone. She paused in the center of the lobby to check a notification, unaware of anything but the glowing screen. A man in a neat suit, carrying a thin folder, approached her with measured steps. He asked in a polite, clear voice whether she was Maya Vale. She nodded automatically, still half in her phone, and he opened the folder, took out a sealed envelope, and said that he was there to serve her with a petition for dissolution of marriage, including temporary financial and custody orders. The words hung in the air for a few seconds, heavier than any punchline. She blinked, pulled her eyes from her phone to his face, and then down to the envelope in his extended hand. She took it with stiff fingers and tore it open on instinct, pulling out the first page. Her eyes moved quickly over the printed lines, catching familiar words arranged in an unfamiliar way. Marriage, dissolution, temporary schedule, shared responsibilities, and finally, her own name and mine together at the top. Her face drained of color and then flushed with anger. She looked around, finally seeing me standing near the pillar, and walked toward me with the paper trembling in her hand. She asked how I could humiliate her like this in a public place, how I could turn one honest bit and a few jokes into a decision to end our marriage. She said that I was proving every story she had ever told about me, showing everyone that I was weak and controlling. I listened, letting her words fall without trying to catch them. When she paused, I answered in a low, even voice that I had not done this because of one night or one joke. I said I had done it because she had spent months telling the world that fidelity meant nothing to her and that she would sleep with other men if she wanted. I added that I refused to teach our daughter that love meant swallowing public humiliation until nothing was left inside. While we spoke, the man with the folder approached me and asked me to confirm my name for his record. I did so calmly, giving my full name and nothing else. He noted it on a small form attached to his clipboard and said that service was complete. Then he stepped back and moved toward the exit, already turning his attention to whatever task came next. A few people in the lobby pretended not to look at us, their gazes sliding away when we met their eyes, but I knew they had heard enough to understand the basics. Maya kept talking, her voice rising and falling, trying to frame herself as the victim of an overreaction. She said that she had only been expressing modern views, that the world was on her side, that I would look like the cold villain in this story. I replied that stories written in captions and comments could say anything, but that these papers in her hand did not care about how many likes she had. I told her I was not trying to win a crowd. I was simply choosing to step out of the one she had built at my expense. Her meeting was still ahead of her. The elevator doors opened and closed behind her as other people went on with their day. She stood in the middle of the lobby, holding the envelope, the first page of the petition fluttering slightly in her hand. I looked at her one last time, then turned toward the glass doors. As I walked away, I saw our reflection for a moment in the polished surface. Her still, me moving forward. The doors slid open, letting in a rush of city noise. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, and as they closed behind me with a soft hiss, I knew that for the first time in a long time, my life was no longer a backdrop to her jokes about fidelity.